Hi, everybody. Welcome to AI4U, a brand new podcast brought to you by Fairfield Dolan and the new AI and Tech Institute. Really excited about this podcast. We're going to be learning about all sorts of amazing things. This particular episode, we'll learn about how to go from prompt and pray to statistical inevitability. We'll learn about what AI can learn from us and what we can learn from AI, how to prompt it in a way that gets it to go where we want it to go, to learn that AI is neither God nor garbage, but somewhere in between. I'm really excited. By way of introduction, my name is Philip Maymin. I'm the endowed Schramm Chair of Analytics. I'm the MSBA Program Director of Fairfield Dolan in the Analytics Department. The main big cheese here will be Dr. Jie Tao, who is the leader of AI and Tech Institute, the director. He's a professor of analytics as well. He is one of the world's leaders in AI. He has won numerous awards. I think virtually every award Fairfield has to offer, including the Best Graduate Teacher Award, Best Research Award. He's won awards at conferences. He's an NVIDIA certified deep learning instructor. He's taught all of our most advanced courses. He's a thought leader in the world of AI. I learn from him every single day. I'm really excited to kick this off. Jay.
So look at this project brief on the screen. It's nearly perfect. It is the right tone. It is in the right format. It's spot on. And took the AI ChatGPT less than 5 seconds to generate. But 5 minutes ago, the same AI gave me so much headache because it gave me something really useless. The difference really wasn't the AI. It was the instructions. It's probably still using prompt and pray. You give some kind of prompt and you hope it works, which we're wasting 90% of the power of AI on the table. Today, we're going to walk you through how to stop gambling and start engineering.
That is a powerful claim. Let's start with that term you just used, prompt and pray. I love that. What is it? Why is it such a universal problem?
It's universal because, it's been there and everybody's using that, myself included. I remember, when I was preparing my presentation and, I'm using AI to give me a presentation, right? It really doesn't work that way. It misunderstood, my notes, my intention, because, I didn't give it enough help. I left it alone to create this. Then I realized, I was the problem, not the AI. And I was a terrible manager of my new AI intern.
Interesting. I don't know if there's stats for this, but I bet most chats with ChatGPT and others, they're just one-off, right?
Yeah.
You ask one thing and you get the answer and you walk away.
Yeah.
That's like prompt and pray and then give up.
Yeah. And we are treating AI as Google, as a search engine, which is not what they are designed for. So that's why we're not getting expected results because we didn't use it properly.
It's probably how, when the internet first came out and people started using Google and search, they used it wrong also, right?
Yeah.
They didn't know like shortcuts, like the minus sign, right?
Yeah.
And or
Yeah.
quotes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a process of people learning, presumably. Is that right?
Yes. And particularly what's specific about AI or these chat models or chat tools we're using is they're not like our generalist-doctor. They read every textbook in the math school. They know everything they should know, but they don't know specific things. Think about it. You go to a generalist-doctor. You didn't tell him what problem you're having. You didn't show him any profiles or charts or whatever. And you say, okay, tell me what I'm wrong. What's wrong with me? Right? That's a guessing game.
It is.
Everybody can guess, but they won't guess it right.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple of things that have helped me in this approach is some features that ChatGPT has, and I think others have it too, like the memory, right? So it can look at some of your earlier chats. It has some memory that it can, so it gets some context that way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new wearables now. I think Friend is one or a bunch of others, right? Where I don't know, but I think all it's really doing is recording a bunch of stuff to have more context. That would be lovely, right?
Yeah.
That would,
Yeah.
But would you say that that's more like a more focused prayer at that point, where you're talking to a priest or someone who knows you? Or would that solve a lot of the problems, just knowing the context around you? Is that sufficient?
I think it definitely will solve some of the problem because, when it knows you personally, it will know your style, your preference. But it's still lacking another layer of context, which is the problem-specific context. You still have to, it knows about you. It knows, was coming back to the generalist doctor thing, it knows something about you, but still doesn't know things about your condition, doesn't have your chart. You still have to provide that, to give it enough support to the problem.
Okay, so you say you're the problem. I disagree. I don't think you're a problem. But for the users, it's a user issue, right?
Yeah.
It's a familiarity issue. What is the right way for us to think about it? So generalist doctor, you mentioned. Unpack that a little bit.
So, they read, like I said, they read every textbook. It has, according to Musk, already consumed all the knowledge we have created since the dawn of humanity. But the specific problem, like we have to be very specific about, what we want, what we need, what is the problem, what is the background of the problem, what is actually the solution, what do we want it to look like? We need to provide that kind of information. So, like you're telling the doctor, I don't feel well. You cannot just say, I don't feel well. What exactly don't you feel well? And maybe you're allergic to something, so the doctor shouldn't prescribe that to you.
Well, so let me ask you this. That's one way to use AI, is I know what my problem is and I need an AI to help me. So I feel unhealthy or I have certain symptoms. Here's what they are. Diagnose me, fix me. Another, I'm sure you've used it this way too, is more of a brainstorming, like a partnership approach. That, correct me if I'm wrong, that approach, when you're in that frame of mind, you don't even really know what your problem is, right? You're kind of spitballing and brainstorming. You're not really doing prompt and pray. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
It's more of a conversation.
It's more of a conversation. So that's, I think, is also tied to what we just said. It's not a search engine. It shouldn't be a one-off thing. It should be an ongoing conversation. So one of the pattern we use, a lot, and we train people in our training workshops, is basically we let AI to ask you follow-up questions to keep the conversation going. I have this general idea, but I really don't know the specifics, so I cannot provide a specific. So now ask me follow-up questions on this idea. So that will force you as the user to think about, what are the specifics.
So a lot of these AIs, they do ask questions now. They're not the kind you said. They're more like, would you like me to do this? Right? Which is lovely. That's nice, because you're going to say, yes, sure. I didn't even think that's great. But the kind of questions you're talking about are different. They're more about helping me hone my problem rather than helping it figure out the solution, right?
Exactly.
So why doesn't it do that by default? I mean, I suppose they could change their system prompt to do that. But I don't think there's anything in the system prompt that prevents AI from doing that naturally. Right? So why doesn't AI do that? Is it like a certainty bias, or like it worships the user as if it's talking to God, and how dare I question God? Why doesn't it naturally, like a human would, say, well, what do you mean? Do you mean this or do you mean that?
I think, we don't want to be too technical here, but I think, before any AI was shipped to the users, they went through a process called instructional training or fine-tuning. Specifically, it's fed, thousands, millions of pair of questions and answer, and the question part always assigned to the user, and the answer part always assigned to the assistant, which is the AI. So they are familiar with that pattern. And sometimes you have to manually flip that switch and say, now you ask the question. They're familiar with question and answer, but they always wait for you as the user to start the question. And then they will answer. But so we do have a way to flip that switch that they can ask, probing or, like questions, like you said, help us honing on the essence of the problem.
I see. So in a sense, part of what you'll talk about today and throughout this podcast is we, as the users, should also not treat the AI like some kind of God. Right? We should guide it and tell it how we want it to respond to us and communicate with us and help us.
It's not a God, and it's not garbage. And
Somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. But, what we are seeing is a lot of people are treating it as either of these two. Wow, it gave me such wonderful results. Oh, it's really useless. But, you won't hire an intern and say, you're my God, or you're just a piece of garbage, right? HR will talk to you. So
So tell us more about the intern analogy. You've talked about someone called like a brilliant but clueless intern.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So basically, if we translate a little bit from the doctor, as you work in the business world, you will hire an intern to do certain thing, right? Let's say talk to somebody to create leads, and that's not what you're gonna do with your intern, right? Just go talk to people and create some leads. I don't think the intern will do a good job.
Good point.
Right? I don't think any intern will do a good job.
You'll probably lose all your leads.
Yes, yes, and AI is actually a brilliant intern. It knows the basics about everything, but it doesn't really know your business. Like we said, doesn't know your business, doesn't know what you do, doesn't, sometimes it doesn't even know what leads means. It will try to guess what you mean by leads. Right. And that's not what you want. Most of the time you won't hire an intern and point them to the desk. Okay, this is your desk. Get working.
Mm-hmm.
Working on what? Right. And how do you should let them know there is a job description. There is how do you evaluate them? There are specific tasks and requirements and things like that. So we should treat AI the same way.
So I think what you'll tell us about is how to write like an AI job brief. And that'll be important for the details. But on a more grander picture, isn't it a little bit frustrating that we have to, if we write out all of the details that we want the intern to do, by that point we should have just done it ourselves, right? Isn't that faster?
I heard that statement, you're not the first one asking something like that. I think the answer is like two-layered or more. The first layer is with these model we're dealing with, we have to provide a lot of, like we said, context to support it, at least to get started. Then, once, it is familiar, it does have some kind of memory. So if it's familiar with certain kind of task, maybe you'll provide less and less support. Like your intern, right? Your intern is learning how to do certain things certain way. And the next time, your job debrief or job brief becomes, simpler, something like that. And in later episodes, we're going to talk about something a little bit different from the large language models we're dealing with, which is basically what AI refer to, what we call agents. And not just us, everybody's talking about agents. Everybody's saying 2025 is the year of agents. So with agents, you do, spend less time creating the job description or the job brief, but you let it to take more control. But it takes, an intermediate step from, where we start with Chad and where we end with, the agents. So, well, in a couple of episodes, we'll get there.
Okay. So the right way to think about the job brief, or closer by analogy, would be you're making an investment, right?
Yeah.
You're onboarding this person.
Yeah.
You have to train them, give them some tasks, which is a big investment of time.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, it'll pay off many, many times down the road, right? Both in this particular intern AI, with other things, your own human capital, you'll know how to brief them better.
I think that if we still use intern as an example, as analogy, is you start this task by you have two ways. We're saying you have two ways. One is, okay, here's a 30-second debrief on your task and go do it. And the other way is, here's a 30-minute debrief on the task, and we'll break it down everything for you and then go do it. The first one, a lot of people choose the first one. Even they learn how to properly prompt, which is how you communicate with AI, how properly prompt, a large language model with details. They still choose the first way because they're tired of all the typing they have to do beforehand. But, trust me, most of the, scenarios you will have, if you choose the 30-second way, you'll spend 30 minutes or longer after to fix, what the intern did.
And it's true.
And most of the time, think about it. You deal with the intern, you give it him or her a task, and they do it, and then they, say they mess up. You're gonna spend much more time to fix that, and then sometimes those things are not even fixable.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, it's worth your while to create that detailed AI job brief before you actually give it the job.
one way I've played with them, and tell me if this is a workflow that you also do. I think it is. Start something quick, see what it says. If it's at least on the right path, great. If it's completely wildly off, in other words, you start iterating, you start a new chat, essentially, right? Just make a little better, a little better, a little better. So that's a nice thing. You can't do that with an intern, right? It's a one shot. Their summer's over. But here you can try a few times until you get the bigger prompt that incorporates all the learnings you've seen from the past AI interns that have failed.
Yes. I think that's good because, like we said, any kind of prompt should be improving, and we can improve that one shot, or we can improve that iteratively. What you describe is improving them iteratively. Every version is improving a little bit. A lot of times, we cannot even get a one-shot perfect prompt, we want. Like we don't do a lot of things one shot. The best analogy for that is, both you and I, we code, right? We write computer codes. And I think it's ridiculous if somebody give you a task and say, start coding without you using backspace.
Right.
That would be ridiculous. And I don't think I can function that way. I don't know if you can. You're clearly a genius, than me, but I don't really think I can function that way. So if you cannot do it, how can you expect AI to do it?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good analogy. Yeah. So tell us about what are some structures that go into this AI job brief for the intern?
There are multiple versions of this on the internet, and you'll see a million, tutorials on how to create, structured prompts and things like that. So we drill that down to 4 things. The first one is a role. You have to give AI a role. What do you want it to be? Like, coming back to the generalist-doctor thing, you want it to be a physician, a surgeon. If a surgeon, what kind of surgeon, right? Then that's the role. That's what's magical about that is once you give it a role, it will activate that certain part of knowledge it has, and it will let it to honing on that part of the knowledge rather than something irrelevant.
Okay, so role is you're telling the AI who to pretend to be.
Yes.
And you speak to it like the AI, you will be Albert Einstein or whoever. Yeah. This might take us a little off topic, but I do want to ask you this question. Suppose you go back to 1904 and it's only trained up through 1904 and you say, you are Albert Einstein, you are a Swiss patent clerk, right? What are the limitations? Would it come up with E = MC² and all of his miraculous, 4 years, 4 papers in 1 year? Is that not enough to say you are the world's smartest person, come up with new ideas, invent brilliant new things? What are the limitations of the role?
So there are certain limitations, and limitation these days seem like short-lived anyway. We're moving the limitations by days. These so 2 things. With regular commercial large language model we're using, the role is usually, limited by, you're just activating the past knowledge and you want it to refer to the knowledge it has. So for new exploratory tasks, I don't know how good they can be. But just this past week, MIT actually used their large language model to have 2 scientific discoveries. So if you have a penny, every discovery now you have 2, right? But that's wonderful because it never happened before. It actually create new things, new theories, new scientific findings out of the knowledge it has. Before we're just letting it guess. Now maybe we're moving on to something different and not just random guessing or even educated guessing. They're onto something. They learn some kind of pattern or something like that.
And presumably they did more than just say, roll, you are the world's smartest human being.
I'm sure they are. That's why, in structured prompts, we have other parts. The second one is audience. Mm-hmm. So you let AI know who it is. You should also let AI know who you are or who your audience are. For example, coming back to my presentation example, I should let AI know what kind of audience I'm talking to, right? If it's the C-suite, people, I should use less technical jargons, but talk more about business impacts and strategy. And AI wouldn't know that if you didn't tell it. It would just assume guessing on the topic you're talking about. Okay, you're talking about AI. Maybe you want to talk about the technical stuff. And that will really turn my audience away. And vice versa, right? If I'm talking to the technical stuff, I should avoid the big picture thing and talk about, hey, how I build this thing, in every detail.
That makes sense. And to clarify, the audience isn't just about style. It's because you can imagine you take the output and you say, now make it for a less technical audience. But you're saying it's something even deeper. It's what it should focus on, what insights would be useful for a particular audience, not just the manner in which it speaks.
Yeah. The manner it speaks, is a letter thing we call formatting. But the audience is, like you said, is you wanted to think about, what kind of insights are helpful for this particular group of people. A lot of times if you are having a conversation with AI, that's you, right? Trying to guess what I think is important. Because sometimes, like you said, we don't know ourselves. We maybe take a lot of things for granted is not the right term here, but we just assume this is the way, right? But AI doesn't know you're assuming that's the way. What is the proper way? They don't really know that. So a lot of times you just giving it a little bit background. And like you said, you can look at the results and say, okay, this is what I want, or this is not what I want. Again, the follow-up is very important.
So we'll get to the rest of them. I want to ask you a bit of a meta question.
Okay.
How would in system prompts, would it make sense to have a system prompt that it decides if it's insufficiently detailed to ask questions? Well, what role should I play? Who is the audience for this? Is that a useful thing, or should that be done on a more project by project basis?
So the system prompt is a very interesting thing. So I know there are different theories, different methods about how to create a system prompt. But my personal way is I always start with the bare minimum system prompt. A lot of times I do give it a role and made probably an audience, but not too much after that. Then I'll just start prompting it. Like you said, my first version of the conversation, I don't have that much control. Because to my understanding, a very important thing the system prompt actually serves is I keep giving it the same instruction again, and do this and review this and change this. If that is a pattern, I should add it to the system prompt. So a lot of times I'm experimenting what kind of system prompt I should give it. And my first sign is the repetitive instructions I give it. If my rule of thumb is, if I type these instructions more than 3 times in this conversation, it belongs in the system prompt. So, but the overarching thing is actually the role, the audience. I think they do belong in the system prompt rather than you type it every time. But since you asked that, there is a neat trick here. Is you don't have to assume, or you give it a role in the system prompt. It is a psychologist. It is a psychologist from all the way. Sometimes you can say, now act as a patient. You can give it a temporary role and say, do something different. So you can do that, but figure out the overarching role of the conversation, put that in the system prompt, and whenever you need, you can insert a temporary role and let it do something a little bit different.
So there's a system prompt for the particular, I guess, task you're working on, the project you're working on, let's say. Then you also have a system prompt for all your chats.
Yeah.
Does that one grow over time for you too, or is that kind of static?
That one is more static than the project-based one because, that one usually contains, what I want in general as, general principles, what I want. You should always ask follow-up questions. You should never assume anything.
Don't hallucinate.
Yeah, do not hallucinate. And things like that, belongs in the general system prompt that controls the overall behavior across different projects, across different conversations. But I try to keep that as lean as I can. Again, and I'll be very hesitant to add anything to that overall system prompt. Because when a conversation happens, the AI will first load the overall system prompt. Then if you have any projects or conversation-specific system prompt, then your prompt. And we all know AI may have attention span like a goldfish, right? You're taking these, what we call context window, all of these prompts, the overall system prompt, this project-specific, your prompt, they all take place in that context window, in its memory. When you fill up that memory, you basically, AI will start forgetting things you said earlier. Remember, what's the first thing you put in? The overall system prompt. It will start throwing out the overall system prompt. So that's why we say, context engineering, as everybody's saying these days, that's very important. But one other thing, personal opinion, I think we're treating context engineering wrong. I know that's a strong claim, but what I'm thinking wrong is, how we approach this is we're gonna expand the context window of these models to 1 million, 2 million. Now, right, we reach 2 million, meaning you can roughly have, 1.5 million words that the AI will remember. But depending on what kind of task, if you're writing a novel or doing some creative work, like what we say, coding and things like that, normally, a general rule is, if you reach 150K or 200K, 200,000 tokens in a conversation, the quality will deteriorate, So I think we should focus on how to properly use the limited context window rather than trying to push it to be as large as we can.
That makes sense. It's kind of like we're in the floppy disk phase, right? We're still worried about keeping it down as opposed to we have a hard drive and you can access everything.
Yeah. So that's why I think, back to your question is, the overall system prompt, I'm trying to keep it as lean as possible. It doesn't keep up, too much of the context window, the memory space. And, basically, you'll see there are, tutorials online asking you to create a 50,000 words prompt to solve a problem. And a lot of time they work. But that's not my style. My style is I'll start with maybe 500 words. And see, maybe eventually I will have that 50,000 words prompt, but I don't usually start with that.
Okay. So back to the job. So we have the role, the audience. What else do we tell?
So the third thing is usually the formatting. What kind of formatting? If you still remember the initial results will show you the project brief, they're in a weird formatting. They're not wrapped well. But that formatting is called Markdown. That's very useful when you deal with a different system. You want to pass that brief to a different system to not to read, but maybe to process. So using Markdown is actually some kind of formatting requirement. You can also say something like, I want a bullet list instead of a long-running paragraph, or keep this under 50 words. Because we're just talking about the context window thing. Whatever AI response is also in its context window. So a lot of times, particularly early on in the conversation you have with AI, you want the response to be as brief as it can.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I would give AI context, right? But not in one shot, not in one prompt. I'll give it, whenever I think of something. So in my system prompt, I always add this. When I give you context or instructions, only respond the word noted. So that's my way of saving the context for things. And
because otherwise it's just an overeager intern starts working before it has all the information.
Yes. So that's why we need fine-grained control that way. And the last one, after formatting is usually the task. And that's interesting because, most people, when they prompt and pray, task is the only thing they care about. And we treat task the last. There are certain ways. Again, large language models are black boxes. We don't really know how it thinks, but there is actually a very engineering way of explaining why we put task the last. Is remember the context window thing? When we reach the context window, we'll throw out things earlier in the conversation. And it will actually pay more attention and underlying the hood of large language model will actually pay more attention to the last bit of information and the very first, which means it will first load the overarching system prompt, like we said. It will keep that part of that, even if it reaches the context window. Then we'll remember the very last thing. We keep task the very last thing, so we'll still focus on what specific task you wanted to do.
Is there? And I think about it this way. You tell me if it's the wrong way to think about it. I agree. Of course, we don't know what's going on inside, but this game where you play, I forget what it's called, where you have a bunch of people's faces. I have a bunch of people's faces, and I ask you, I'm trying to guess yours. Is it a boy or girl wearing glasses or not? So you try to eliminate half every time with the questions. That's the way I'm thinking about these prompts. So you want to give it something that'll first eliminate as much as possible. So the role, right? Now it knows like the basic idea of who it's supposed to be, and it can ignore cooking or dancing or whatever is inappropriate. Fine. Within that role, okay, how do I further tighten it to an audience, right? And do all of that stuff, keep narrowing down the funnel until now when I give it a task, it's not going to misinterpret it about a billion other ways that it could. It's already in that funnel.
Yeah.
Is that a good way of thinking about it? At least as an analogy.
Yeah, it actually works as a funnel. Every part that we add something, the role of the audience, the formatting, the task, we're making it more and more specific. Because when you drill down because the role can apply to a lot of relevant tasks. The audience, same thing. Formatting, sure. But the task, you're being very specific, right? This is the exact thing I want you to do.
The one thing I get confused though, but with that analogy, is I would put formatting last.
Yeah.
But you would put task last. Does it make a difference, or it's just a?
I would say most of the time it doesn't make a difference. But there are two reasons why we want to put task last. The first reason I briefly explained is how large language model works is we'll focus on the earliest information and the latest. So depending on, which one you think is more important, if formatting is more important, you should definitely put formatting the last. But most of the time we think, tasks are the more important information, so we put it last. The second thing is, I don't know if I've noticed, if you take the acronyms, it's RAFT. It's RAFT.
That spells
it's
a word.
Easier to, yes, it's easier to remember when you build these, structured prompts.
That makes sense. So RAFT is the AI job brief for the intern.
Yes. That's our approach. You will see a lot of approach craft, but they're basically the same thing. If you think about craft, it's just adding context before your role. So there are different approaches, but if you look at them, they're all talking about the same thing. You want to give it a persona. You want to let it know, what kind of tone and format you should be talking about. Then you let it know what specific things you want it to do. That's the job brief.
And then after the task, like if I was really talking to an intern, I would explain the task. All the other stuff sounds great. Now we get to the task. Then there would probably be maybe some examples, right? Or maybe some, what I expect would be challenges for them and how I would expect they want to try to address some of those things. That's fine to continue after the task, right? Or would you suggest, how would you explain the problems before you explain the task?
A lot of times, actually, the problem is part of the task. So
it's just a longer task.
It's a longer task, and usually it's longer because I would break the very, like, you want to be specific, right? So a lot of times you will see I have a 20 item number list and the tasks. First you do this, then you do that, but when you get started, you don't have that 20 steps or things like that. So sometimes you'll give it the first task, and then you'll follow up. You don't have to do the RAFT thing again because it's still taking effect.
Makes
Right?
sense.
Then you continue with the next item on your task and keep the conversation going.
That is awesome. It is really cool how broad it is and how deep this approach. The specific RAFT makes sense, but more generally, the idea that you want to communicate with the AI in a more detailed way, like you would, like you said, with a brilliant but clueless intern, to get them on task and working in a way that you'd expect. How broadly do you use this approach?
I think I use it for everything, like we said, from, preparing a presentation to, help me write code, which we're going to talk about in later episodes. But more specifically, even this podcast you're listening to, you're watching itself is actually creating using the same methodology we're telling you about. So we want to let you know we are very genuine about this. We are using this every day. Before we can tell you that this is good. So if you do like this podcast, you will like the methods we're telling you.
That's great.
Well, of course, if you don't like the podcast, you wouldn't know the method we're telling you.
So I noticed here in this example, you used, well, first of all, you put context after role. You'll have to answer for your sins there. But you also used Markdown, right? Those hash marks that represents like headings and stuff. So you don't just talk to it the way like a single paragraph. You broke it up. Why is that?
So if you put it in a single paragraph, most of the time you're letting AI to guess which part is what, which part is role, which part is context, which part is audience. But why do you want it to guess when you can make it clear? So that's why we're adding these hashtags, and section titles. So think of this as we're creating in the job brief, we're creating a binder. Every section in that binder were labeled. This is your role. This is your audience. This is your formatting. So, we can make it very clear, very structured. So a lot of people actually tested structured versus unstructured prompts, particularly for knowledge-intensive tasks. Structured prompts are more effective. And they even mirrored, different structure of structured prompts. And the consensus, I think, right now is Markdown is the easiest way to implement because you're just adding, section headings to your prompt, break them into subparagraphs and adding section headings. Rather than something like XML, you're essentially writing computer code, writing language in computer code. But the benefit is not that significant to justify the extra effort. So I think what I'm recommending here is spending a little bit more time making it more structured will make a difference most of the time.
Is one way of thinking about it, the AI, in other words, if you give it more compute, it doesn't matter, right? But you want it to use its intelligence for the task at hand rather than give it like riddles and puzzles and mysteries, right?
Yes.
So you want to make it as simple as possible.
Yes.
Right? Make it as easy. So like you would with an intern too.
Yes. You won't give it intern, okay, here are 12 puzzles. When you solve the 12 puzzles, your big reward is this huge prize you're going to work out.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Now here, so you called it context, but really that's just a placeholder. You really are talking about the audience there, right? Because you say it's for our internal head of engineering. So these are not magical incantations like you have to say the word role or the word audience. It's it understands synonyms. It understands the goal of what you're going for, right? This is, like you said, binders for it to have mental compartments of if it needs to, in a sense, quote unquote, look up, remind itself, right? Guide itself a little bit, it can find it quickly.
Yes. So at least in one conversation with the AI, keep those labels consistent. Right? You don't want to change from context to audience, then back to context, which I'm sure large language model can handle that, but why add that, layer of complexity that's not really needed? But, like you said, you can change them, use them interchangeably. And I don't think it will really make a difference.
So you've mentioned that LLMs, of course, are prediction engines. Right? They're trying to predict the next token syllable word. How can that possibly, if you're just predicting the next word, why would a binder format or why would a a markdown format? Why would that change anything?
So the long story, without using any technical jargons, is regarding the training data. A lot of people, including famous people, big names, saying that we train large language models on the internet. Right? It's the whole internet. But we actually train large language models, and not the internet we see, is the internet computers see. What they see is not just this nice blog or this TikTok video. What they see is actually the web programming code behind what you see. So they are familiar with that code structure. Let it be marked down. Think about how many GitHub repos it was trained on. So they're familiar with that structure more than the natural running paragraphs we are familiar with. Which is, there's the interesting side story. We're talking about AI assisted coding, in the next few episodes. But when we look at that, AI is actually doing a worse job trying to write code we would understand. If we take away that limitation, just go invent the language you're familiar with. We don't have to we human don't have to understand. They can actually solve the problem much faster.
Really?
More efficiently.
Really?
Yeah.
They create their own
Language.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Because a lot of times we force things, so they have to learn things, that may not be necessary. For example, a programming language that we understand is not necessary for AI to complete certain tasks. I know we're going to get into ethics conversation over there, and we're going to talk more about that. But, that is something. So, back to the point, we are, forcing it to look at things that not really familiar to us because, we don't see, for example, HTML codes. But when they were training, they do see these codes. They are familiar with tags and hashtags and things like that.
Okay. So the part of the reason we want to do this is to help guide it to change the probabilities to be closer to whatever hopefully the truth is.
Mm-hmm. When you have a structured prompt, you're basically leading AI to give you a good quality answer. It's no longer just praying and hoping. It's statistically inevitable.
What a phrase, statistically inevitable instead of prompt and pray. That's what a difference in perspectives, right? Where you kind of give up control and hope for the best versus you guide it and nurture it and lead it towards, even though you don't know the answer, you're helping it come to whatever it will decide is the best possible answer.
So as an engineer by training, that's what the beauty of engineering is, right? You're building product and most of the time will behave in a certain way. It's inevitable, it's predictable, it's working as expected. That's why I think, when people first coined the term prompt engineering, they choose the word engineering. Mm-hmm. Because you are, following an engineering scientific way of doing things. So a lot of, engineering tasks do make, the job very more complex at the beginning because you have to set it up. You have to, like we said, you have prompts with different sections and you even have to follow a structure. But the benefit, the return is you will have more expected, consistent results. So I think, it's worth it.
Let's dig into that a little more because that's a really powerful vision. And it's different from how most people use AI, right? Most people are not thinking of making things replicable or reliable. Yeah. They're using it, like you've said, at the big, chat or search or whatever. Yeah. But you use this approach, like it makes sense you would use this approach for a project, for a client, for something that's replicable or something you have classes that you're teaching or certain things that is repeated. You want to make it sure that you're productionizing.
Yeah.
But you also use this in your general, broader life, right? This is like your typical way of using AI now. Is that fair to say?
A lot of the times, for something very simple, Sometimes I'm lazy to type things up, sure. But most of the times I am using it, structure prompts with RAFT or some variation of RAFT. Because I think, it becomes a force of habit right now. When you deal with it, you want to give it context, or you want to find the, different, patterns that you can give it context and specific information in a different way. But yes, you're right.
Very interesting. I wonder, this might be flipping and going the wrong topic, but we are a Jesuit institution, right? So does this insight of how to talk with AI flip and give us equal insight on how we should pray?
I think we can ask the priests on campus that question. I'm sure they can answer that question better than I do. But that would be an interesting conversation to have.
Like, should prayers be more specific or more general? Like you would say in AI, you want to be as specific as you can to get the answer you want, right?
Yeah.
Like statistically inevitable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think help me with something is better than just help me.
Right. So you mentioned, okay, so prompt engineering is a great term and probably has a higher expected salary than prompt artist. But there is a certain artistry that goes into this. I guess that's true about all engineering. There is a certain aesthetic that goes into what you're doing. How does it apply here? How do you think of the engineering versus art here?
What I view this is the engineering give you the bottom line. That it will at least, trying to guarantee the results are acceptable or expectable, all as we said. But the art part, the artistry part, will actually determine the upper bound of the results, how good it can be. So, for example, I always keep prompts that's working for me. But, next time I use it, I'll try to optimize it a little bit. For example, can I save a few words here? Or should I actually add a step in between? Because every time I use it, I feel like I have to add that step, to do something different. But why don't I add that, in the task section and for, right? So I would say that's more the art part of this, because engineering is just the structure. Like you're building a house, engineering is the blueprint and the structure of your house. But our part is the design, the interior design, your flavor. You choose this carpet with that, couch, and your guests will be very happy about, they will appreciate, the structure of your house too, right? You don't want to go 4 flights of stairs to go to your living room. That's not good. But, your interior design, the art part, will actually bring it to a new level. So that's the upper bound. So engineering give you the lower bound, so the AI doesn't screw up. But the prompting art part will actually give you sometimes, way beyond the expectation, way better than what you expected, results.
Interesting. So then if we've talked about, like, if it doesn't work, you might iterate. Fine. Yeah. Do you find you iterate more on the engineering or on the art part?
I think both for sure, but I think most of the time I'm working on the art part because the engineering part, the structure, we're talking about standard apartment here. It has 4 walls and a door and a few windows, right? That's the structure.
There's not much to change.
Not much to change, exactly. But in every apartment, you can do something different. This one wants an open concept kitchen, right? But that one doesn't. So you're tweaking a lot of the art part, I guess.
This is so valuable. I know in our audience, we'll have a couple of different kinds of people. We'll have people who've never used AI. We'll have people who use it the way most people use it, which is kind of one-off.
Yeah.
And we'll have some professionals who've been using it consistently with this format, with these structures. And I think all of them will have benefited from this. So that's very valuable.
Yeah.
given this aha moment that we all have, that we want to have the engineering and the structure and this AI job brief and treat it like an intern and give it RAFT or other structured and meta prompts and all the rest of it, what it can be a little overwhelming for any of those people in the audience. What would you recommend as like the first step?
I think, the first step is now you have an idea. You listen to what we're blabbing for quite, a while now. So open your browser or your app, put this into action, give it a try, solve a problem. So we'll put together a toolkit with what we talk about, with specific templates that, you saw on the screen, what we used for that project brief problem. Mm-hmm. We were throwing, a few more, templates for sales generation, even the one I used to create this podcast, for you to give it a try. And I think, remember, these are templates. These are not, tailored to you. So feel free to change whatever you want. Even you say, the RAFT thing doesn't really make any sense to me. I'll start with task. Give it a try, right? You won't break AI.
Wow. And how much does this cost? You need a credit card number, or debit card, or social security?
It's totally free.
What?
It's totally free. Yeah. So we will, you can get it right now for free and, by visiting our website.
Amazing. That's amazing. And okay, so that's the first step, is get all this free goodies. Fine. Once we've downloaded the toolkit, what next?
So once you master, how to write this AI job brief, the next thing is you want to make it real. For example, now your intern knows how to function. You want to let him or her start reading your company data, the actual information you have in the company. So we will, you'll have to dig deeper into this context engineering part we just mentioned. So you're enriching the context by including actual data into that. So in the next episode, we're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk about how to incorporate more relevant data, and how do you give this data safely, for it to be more of a specialist of certain income. This is the skill that will separate the winners from the losers in AI. So in AI adoption specifically, so make sure you follow or subscribe to, this podcast, so you don't miss this important discussion about, context engineering and how to make it real.
Wow. Jie, that was amazing. Jaw-dropping, eye-opening, really a fantastic episode. Thank you all for joining us. I can't wait to talk to you guys again in our next episode. There's so much to learn here and so much to unpack, and we look forward to learning from you too. Feel free to send us your prompts to us. Treat us as AIs, and we're happy to take your input and mold this series to fit your needs.